I think, look, 3 months is quite a short time. So you need to be looking at what can have the most impact, really playing to your strengths and looking where you've got the most experience and the experience that you can really talk up, looking at where your contacts are already and where you've got kind of warm leads that you can follow up with. Both of those are going to be absolutely crucial. In 3 months, you don't have time for the other things that I would be talking about. If we were saying it's a year, it's 2 years, I want to get a more senior role or a role in a faster growth company or whatever it is, then we'd be looking at longer term things around training, around getting feedback, working on the feedback that you're getting. But I think if you've got 3 months, what are your key strengths? What's your USP? Really focus that down. If there are roles that you've done before, what other similar roles are out there? Because when you're going out and looking for a job, what you want to be doing is you want to be making it as easy as possible for somebody to hire you. And therefore, the better fit that you are with what they're looking for, then, the more likely it is you're going to get something in 3 months. And really leveraging that warm network, because we know that, exact statistics slightly debatable, because the research that this came from, I think is not, perhaps the most robust, but in general, I think we're saying that around 75% of jobs are going through networks. So really leveraging those contacts heavily and not being embarrassed to do it.
Well, that's a lot, 75%. And we are going to talk about the hidden job market, as some people label it, in a while. But you also make a very good point with regards to making it easy for the employer to hire you as a candidate. So before someone is hired, like they also need to be found, right, on LinkedIn or elsewhere. So what is the best way for someone to actually increase the visibility, to make it easy to be found on social media or on the internet?
So I was thinking, you're an amazing example of this, because you have really niched down. You're not talking about recruitment generally, you're talking about IT recruitment. So if we used you as a case study, we would say, okay, well, he really, really knows what his niche is. He's being pretty specific. So if you're looking for a job, I'm not saying, oh, I'll take any IT job. No, I'm looking for exactly this IT job that I exactly have experience in. Here we're not talking about career change. We're talking about, if you want to get a job as quickly as possible, that it's going to be easiest to do something that is similar. It's going to be easiest to do something where the people who are looking at you have real clarity over what the skill set and strengths that you offer are. So niching down, I think, is really important, and clarity of message around what your niche is. Once you have that clarity, you then want to think about who you want to connect with and where those people are hanging out. So LinkedIn is, the best social business network. I mean, it's the only one that has an almost universal reach across the professional working population. And it's such an easy place to be connecting with people and putting out thought leadership. You don't need to be doing it, 5 times a day, but some really well thought out comments perhaps on what's happening in your industry, beginning to engage also with recruiters, with hiring managers, but with senior executives, also with colleagues across your industry, just begins to position you as an expert voice in your niche. And I think that's a great place to start. I think in conferences, I'm always saying to my clients, we absolutely know that it's people who self-promote. This is really well proven by research. The people who self-promote most effectively are the people who get promoted and earn more money. So if you want to get seen and you want to get those kind of more senior or more lucrative positions, then I think getting out and being visible is just absolutely crucial. So speaking at conferences, being on LinkedIn, next level could be going on podcasts. You could be increasingly, as you get more visible, you then, so I, for example, have had a magazine column. I've had 2 magazine columns in the past, gone on lots of podcasts. And then, of course, because people have seen my name, they think, oh, we need someone to comment on leadership and careers. Okay, well, I've seen this woman 5 times before, so let's ask her to come and comment on this current news story, for example. And then suddenly you're on Bloomberg or you're on the news. So just really being quite vocal and not being embarrassed to be vocal. We're living in this time now where it's so easy to become a thought leader, as long as you have clarity over what you're trying to say and something interesting to say. It's easy.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting how you enumerate all these activities, to post on LinkedIn and arrange podcasts and they go for conferences. But some people may be a bit embarrassed, as you just also kind of mentioned, right? They may not want to promote themselves because it kind of doesn't feel right for a lot of people out there. So what is your best advice to people who are kind of sitting there? They know that they should go a bit public, but don't feel secure enough yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really common, and it's partly personality based. So people who are more introverted, who have lower kind of levels of comfort with social engagement, won't want to put themselves out there as much. Some people are much more private, some people are more public. It's really normal. So it's partly personality, it's partly cultural. So it's really noticeable that there are different cultural norms around self-promotion. So for example, in the UK, we're very not self-promotional. In the US, people would tend to be more comfortable with it. It's just something that's done a lot more. The problem is we're pretty much operating in a global job market, and particularly at more senior levels, you can't really rely on cultural norms to save you from having to promote yourself. The way that I'm talking about it is really about becoming a thought leader in your industry. You don't have to be a thought leader to be really successful. It just helps. But you can be a thought leader on a more private scale. You don't have to be on the news or be having a podcast. Nevertheless, I think there is a necessity, if you want to be seen, if you want to be that person who gets promoted. And I've got countless examples of clients, even in the last 6 months, where the people who are getting promoted, the people who are getting the good jobs, people who are those are the people who are being talked about either at the recruitment or the promotion table. And it's too difficult for the organization at a basic level. It's too difficult for the organization to say, no, we're not going to promote this person, or no, we're not going to hire this person. Like, they need to have them. Why do they need to have them? They're really good at their job. Yes, but lots of other candidates will be good at their job. We like them. Yes, great. They're a cultural fit, but lots of people will be a cultural fit. So what's the thing that's giving you that edge where they have to say yes to you? And that's usually some kind of a profile, but it can be very much removed from you as a person. You don't have to be on Instagram taking photos of yourself outside your house. That's not what we're talking about at all. It can be very much related to your professional knowledge and experience. So when you're niching down, you're really showcasing your expertise. It should really depersonalize that self-promotion, so that you're able to say, well, all I'm doing here is really sharing my knowledge. And that should make it feel much more possible, and does make it feel more possible for my clients. So in that regard, that's why I really like LinkedIn. If it's too scary to post or too onerous, start commenting on people who are writing things about your industry, and begin having that dialogue on social media. I talk about this in my book. I've got a whole chapter on networking, and my book, actually, I wrote it quite a long time. I wrote it in 2016. It was specifically aimed at women. As my clients have become more senior, unfortunately, predominantly my clients are men now. So, but this applies to everybody, not just women, although my book is about women. With networking, we really want to be kind of trying to reach broader. And there's a section on my in my book, in the networking section, around social networks. And what we interviewed lots of well-known people in the book, but some of the people we interviewed were the very most senior people at all the social networks. And what they all said universally was that social networks operate in sort of pods of interest. You don't need to have 1 million people watching your videos on YouTube. You just need this pod of really engaged, like-minded people in your sector who are engaging with what you're saying. And you can do that in quite a low-key, not too scary way, I think, by speaking at conferences, by asking good questions on LinkedIn, by striking up a dialogue with people who are just in your area. So it's less about projecting yourself as a personality, and it's more just about sharing your knowledge, and hopefully that makes it feel easier.
Definitely. I mean, this is a great advice because from my experience, a lot of people are kind of insecure to post photos from their personal life, like what they eat. You know, they may kind of look down at this kind of activity because they are in the professional world, but showcasing the experience makes a lot of sense, and it could be an easy way to start posting. But then what's the next thing? Because a lot of people may also wonder, like, do I really become a thought leader just by commenting on social media? Like, there are lots of people who are commenting and they are not thought leaders on anything. So how to go from just purely commenting on social media to being the thought leader? What does it even mean being a thought leader?
So in my mind, I mean, I don't really know what it means, but in my mind, it means being somebody who has something new or interesting to say about a topic, and that topic can be a micro topic. So um, if you think about thought leaders in any sphere, they tend to be quite narrow focused on what they're talking about. So, we gave the example, you were specifically talking about IT recruitment, or in my when I did have very big social media accounts, I was specifically talking about female leadership. Now I talk about leadership generally, but I'm specific about I only work with leaders. And therefore everything I'm talking about is related to that. I don't know, someone like Simon Sinek, he only talks about purpose. He doesn't talk about anything else. He only talks about purpose. He basically has one message. He just has an articulate way of talking about it, and then he just talks about it over and over and over again. And I think that pretty much applies to anybody. And then obviously you can have conversations around it. So you interview different people talking about different things around the topic, but your expertise is very much specific. So I think that's what being a thought leader is, having something new or interesting to say. Do you need to do it in a very public way? No. Will it be helpful increasingly? Yes, I think it will be. So if I think about, I don't know, I think about a client I had this morning. I had an 8:30 client this morning just before this podcast. And I had a client on Friday, completely different industries. One's in one's an entrepreneur, funded startup entrepreneur. The other one's a lawyer. Both of them have recently got kind of C-suite, like either partner or CEO roles, and both of them have really gone out of their way to make themselves visible in the industry. So with the example of the lawyer, he's a lawyer in a particular niche. He posts once a week on LinkedIn, and he just reposts a news article about his specific area of interest with a little legal comment. He also writes a client briefing newsletter for his organization, for his law firm, and that gets sent out quarterly to their clients, and he circulates it around all of his internal contacts because he's a niche lawyer. He gets workflow from deal lawyers, so he circulates that around deal lawyers. Every 6 months, he'll make sure to go to a conference and either be on a panel or speak, or even just ask some really good questions. So I think it can be, it doesn't need to be this huge venture whereby you go and put your face on the front of a podcast thing on iTunes. It doesn't need to be that. But you do need to understand what you're an expert in and start talking about it.
And based on your experience now working with all of these people who are becoming thought leaders, do they often need help with that, or are they kind of, do you trigger this desire to become a thought leader and they just go out there and execute? Does it work this way?
It completely depends. So yes, some people are very, very comfortable with that. Some people are very private and not comfortable with that. But even the most private people, I would be encouraging them to do it in the safest way that they can. I don't know, go and be on a panel. So go to an industry networking event. There's lots of ways that you can do it. But yes, some people naturally do it, some people don't. But those of us who don't naturally do it need to just push ourselves a little bit. Just to kind of give you, otherwise other people have a competitive advantage that you don't, that's easy for you to get.
Interesting. One thing that also resonated with me was that becoming the thought leader could also help to be promoted, not just to get a job. And probably not too many people realize this. So what are the ways to use this new role, new public visibility to get the promotion? Like, do you suggest someone then goes to see managers and ask for promotion because they have 10,000 followers, or what? What's the trigger? Like, how does it even happen?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the first thing I would say is if you're employed, I would make sure that your organization is comfortable with the way in which you're promoting your profile. I wouldn't suggest that you go start, I don't know, start a podcast specifically talking about your organization without their permission. I don't think that's a good idea. But there will be particularly perhaps older people in the organization who don't really understand what you're trying to do. But there will be people who do understand the value of what you're trying to do, and you then become an asset for the organization. So the first thing is I would make sure they're pretty comfortable with what you're doing. I would make sure that I was doing things for the benefit of the organization as much as I was doing it for the benefit of myself. And those two things should really go hand in hand. So in my example of this lawyer I'm working with, so he puts out things on LinkedIn. Obviously on LinkedIn, he's him, but he's also at this company. He puts out these client newsletters. So speaking to marketing in your organization and asking them, okay, what are we doing for client education? What would be useful? Is there any content I could provide you with? Is there anything that would be useful for me to speak at? And often your internal marketing or PR department or both will be really, really helpful in that regard. And they'll just be so happy to have somebody who's willing to do the things that they need to be done, and they will often come to you then with ideas for conference speaking or that sort of thing. I really am a very, very firm believer in not only asking for feedback when you're having conversations with your boss or your manager, but also talking about your aspirations, talking about where you're going. And part of that would naturally be, I'm beginning to hit this leadership level. I want to get my voice out there. I think it will benefit you and the organization because it will bring us more work. It will bring us more clients. It will raise the profile of our product, whatever it is. This is what I'd like to do. Do you have any other suggestions? You're so great. So people like to hear flattery, but they also like to understand what they're receiving. And so that's kind of the way I would play it. It's absolutely possible to do it within an organization. You just need to be clever about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on this note, have you also seen managers or companies in general that are trying to stop the next thought leader to actually become the thought leader? Because for some, it could be also a bit intimidating because they would be afraid of losing the candidate once he or she becomes the thought leader. So have you seen some examples of the companies or top managers stopping the person from being so visible?
I don't think I've ever had an organization say, no, you absolutely can't do that, because it generally generally organizations are pretty clear that if you're a not everybody in an organization is going to be an A candidate, an A worker, right? You've got to have some B workers in there as well. But if you are an A worker, and by that I mean a high performance, high potential person, then they want to keep you and they want to promote you, because that is how their organization is going to grow and be successful. And with that in mind, when you start talking about what you want, they should support you. Absolutely, yes, there are organizations who might not, but what I haven't seen that as much at an organizational level. What I've seen more is managers or leaders who perhaps are quite old school and don't quite understand what you're trying to do, and therefore find it maybe a bit distasteful or countercultural that you are trying to engage in this self-promotion. And that's why I think the positioning of it is really important as something that's going to be of huge benefit to the organization. There absolutely will be competitor clients who have thought leaders within them. And so maybe perhaps using those examples to show them why it's something that is really important. You know, you can get these kind of, I would call it an umbrella leader. And an umbrella leader is somebody who really doesn't want anyone within their team to shine because they want to take all of the glory. And those people will be very threatened by this. But they're going to be threatened also by you being very good. So it may be at some point you're going to have to emerge out from underneath that umbrella leader, and you know, being a thought leader is one of the ways that you can do that. So I would be pretty firm about what I wanted to do and be really asking for opportunities.
Awesome. And one thing you mentioned a while ago was the hidden job market. So the opportunities that are not published anywhere. So how does this happen? How can someone take advantage of this?
So the first thing to do is to think about your network. A lot of people come to me and say, oh, well, I don't really have a net, you know, I've worked in this company, you know, my whole career and I have no net. Well, that's probably actually not true. If you look at, you know, LinkedIn again is a great place to start. Have a look. That sounds like I'm working for LinkedIn. I'm not. But you know, it's a great place to start. Go and map. I've got in my book, I set out some kind of exercises of how to go about working your network. But generally, people tend to fall into two camps with networking. Either you're what I would call, so if we think about networking as like the analogy as a garden, you've either got the spider, and the spider kind of casts their net really, really wide and is happy to kind of trap anything in it, and just kind of see where it's going to go. And that is a very broad, far-reaching network, you know, which can bring a lot of rewards. The other type of networker, which would tend to be the more introverted networker. Often women can be more like this as well. There is a gender difference when we look at networking. That's really clear from the research as well. Would be the spider. Sorry, the bee, the queen bee. And what the queen bee is that they kind of build the hive around them, and they've got these kind of a few bees around them who are really similar to them, and they surround themselves with this really small network and quite reluctant to leave that small network. But the ties within that small network are very, very close. So, you know, it's somebody they can ring for anything, and they can kind of make any ask of that person. And they feel really close. And the truth is that it's actually that you really want to be both. You want to have aspects of the bee and aspects of the spider. So if you and the likelihood is that as I'm talking about it, you will recognize one of those in yourself. Lots of loose ties or a few very close ties. If you're the spider with lots of loose ties, then great, you've got that kind of first stage covered. You have this really, really broad network that you can begin to go out and start looking at what might be out there, you know, shaking the tree and seeing what comes out in terms of the hidden job market. But what you then want to be doing is you want to be strategic and thinking, okay, well, who can I deepen my ties with? Who's going to really be bringing me the most opportunities, the most new connections? And conversely, if you're a person with a few close connections, obviously start with them, but then you really need to be broadening out. So can you be going to industry events? Can you be going to, you know, depending on the size of your company, are there internal networking events you can be going to? You know, other things that you could be attending. You know, it's really interesting. I think the people who are most effective at using the hidden job market would tend to be the people who you might say something like, you know, there's no work situation they couldn't make social, and no social situation they couldn't make about work. Because those people are such natural networkers that everywhere they go, they're thinking about the connection, and they're kind of not embarrassed to do that. And the people who are best accessing the hidden job market are like that. And we all, if we want to do that, need to push ourselves to do that. So first of all, what is your network? Go as broad as possible. Next, begin to contact those people. And that's where a lot of people, you know, we talked about people feeling embarrassed to become a thought leader. People can feel very embarrassed to access their network. But that's, you know, a very intrinsic part of career progression and development is networking, and people generally do accept that. And what I always would encourage people to do is put yourself in their shoes. So if you were receiving this email or this text message or whatever it is, or this message on LinkedIn, how would you feel? And that most people think, well, you know, I'd feel flattered, wouldn't I? I'd be, you know, or if I was really busy, I'd ignore them. but otherwise I'd probably feel quite flattered. And they're probably going to feel the same way as you. You know, they're not going to receive this email asking for a coffee and think, oh, you know, the upstart, how could they send? No, of course not. They're going to think, well, yeah, sure, I'll meet them for a coffee, or actually, no, I'm too busy, I won't. But why don't they meet this guy who might be able to help them? So I think number one, identify your network. Number two, make the ask and don't be embarrassed to make it. And then you're trying to leave every conversation. I'm always suggesting to people, enter the conversation as broadly as possible. You know, I'm looking for my next career move. I really admire what you've done. Again, flattery works really, really well. Really admire what you've done. I'd love to get your advice about who you think I should talk to. And then leave the conversation always with 2 or 3 more people to talk to, the snowball effect, proven networking style, effective networking style. So that's kind of accessing that aspect of the hidden job market. I think another under-recognized, you know, obviously there's recruitment conversations, and I would be nurturing those recruiters who are very good in your industry. There will be very good recruiters and there will be less good recruiters. The less good recruiters are the people who are just pulling the CV that they can fit most easily to the spec. But there are really good recruiters who do take a genuine interest in candidates and will be really invested in finding you a great role, because they know that then you're the next leader, you're going to use them, you're going to, you know, so find those recruiters. They will be out there in your niche, and nurture your relationship with them, because they either will have opportunities that won't be public, or, you know, very likely, and or might have really good connections with recruiters in your preferred favorite dream organization. And so I think that's the kind of third part of the hidden job market that I would be talking to people about, which is, what's your dream job? You know, if you said I could work at any organization doing anything, what would it be? Okay, well, how can you start to get in front of that organization? And that's another aspect of the hidden job market where it's probably the least fruitful, as in you might make direct applications or try to have direct conversations with 10 companies that you love, and maybe you're only going to be successful at connecting with 2 of them. But I have had multiple examples of clients contact organizations, either find a connection somehow, or, you know, in one case completely out of the blue, and get jobs there when there were not jobs advertised, because the passion that they exhibited for that company was such, and they were really clear about their strengths and what they had to offer, that the organization just couldn't say no to them. So I think being, you know, at the end of the day, getting recruited, it's a bit like going on a date, isn't it? You want this organization to believe that you really, really want to work there. And so if you genuinely really, really want to work there, that's a great start.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the process seems to be very, very straightforward, like you explained it very well. And I guess there are some people who are now listening to this and they are pulling their hair a bit, because they are like, oh my God, this sounds like so much work and I have already so much on my plate. So, so how to go a bit more strategic with regards to the outreach? Because you mentioned the wide net, right? Or to build the net wider. But who to connect with? You mentioned a few companies, for example, who, you know, the companies that could be a great target for the employment. But then who to connect with? Should it be the CEO or a CTO or a VP of human resources? Like, how to think about the ideal person to connect with
yeah, I mean, look, it depends what your role is, but I would suggest not human resources if possible. I would suggest that you're wanting to be connecting with the decision makers as much as you can. So maybe the CTO. If you've got something interesting to offer someone, I think that's always a great place to start. And the likelihood is, if you have a niche, you probably have some interesting, you know, information or intelligence to offer them. Perhaps you've connected with them before and you can remember something personal about them. That also really works. And again, flattery, like I said, really, really works as well. So, you know, when I'm thinking about things you might have to offer them, it might be knowledge, it might be, I don't know, a really interesting project you've worked on that has an aspect that might be relevant to them. It might be that you're much younger than them and you really know about social media and that's relevant to what they do. So finding that point of connection would be really, really useful. The best networkers are the people who, and sadly I'm not really like this, but the best networkers are the people who are really good at remembering facts about people, small facts. Because if you remember that, I don't know, somebody's child had a gymnastics competition last time you saw them, that immediately is going to draw you to them and make that connection. It then becomes much more difficult for them not to continue that conversation with you. So, you know, I think having limited time is absolutely fine. It doesn't mean you can't do this stuff. In fact, I've got a copy of my book here, but you won't be able to read it because it'll be back to front. But it is Confidence, Success, and Your Stellar Career in 10 minutes a day. So the reason why it's 10 minutes a day is that there is really, really good evidence that if you just spent 10 minutes a day on career behaviors, which I think is what we're talking about, as opposed to doing your day job, the reward or the career benefit that you will reap is as if you had done 10 times that amount of work. So
Wow.
10 minutes a day, or let's say an hour across the week of doing this stuff is going to just reap absolutely huge rewards. Obviously, and people should be doing that, I really believe, throughout their career, you know, 10 minutes a day, 50 minutes a week, maybe that's one coffee and one LinkedIn article, especially when you've got ChatGPT that can like do your first draft. So it's not huge amounts, but if we're doing it regularly, it really is going to build up. But however, at times of job hunt, you suddenly do need to be investing more time than that, and that's when you'll need to find that kind of additional connection time. But again, how much you know, the 30 minutes of the least productive time of your day, how much work are you actually doing? Could you transition that into, okay, that's the time I connect with people, for example?
Awesome. Well, 10 minutes a day, that's totally doable. So it's great that you clarify this for people who are pulling their hair. So it's totally doable, definitely. Also now I'm kind of thinking, once they connect, they position themselves as candidates right away, or do they try to help the CEO they are connecting with? Like, what is the message they send? Or like, they don't want to be seen as desperate candidates, right? So how to position themselves as a potential candidate, but not to mention that they are a candidate right now? Like, how to find the balance, in other words?
Yeah, look, again, I think it's quite nuanced, this. So it depends who you're speaking to. I mean, if you're speaking to the CTO of your dream organization and you really need to find another job, you probably should just tell them that you're looking for a job and they're your dream organization and you would really like a job there. I don't think that is desperate, especially if you come across in a way that showcases your strengths and why you would be a good hire for the organization. I don't think that playing hard to get is the right strategy in a job conversation. At some stage of a career conversation, it might be. So at the point where you've got the offer and you're negotiating the salary, that might be the point to say, well, actually, you know, I'm actually in conversations with 3 people. Fine. But I think that initial connection point isn't, we don't always need to play hard to get. And I don't think there's any evidence that if you show enthusiasm for an organization or a role, that you are less likely to get it than if you show disinterest. I mean, it's the opposite. It's very clear to me through all my years of coaching that going into the conversation with enthusiasm and flattery is much more effective than with kind of withdrawal and disdain. So I think if you really want a job, then I think it's fine to position it like that. If it's more of a kind of networking conversation and building the ground over the next couple of years, I might want to move, and this is one of the organizations I'm interested in connecting with, or this person just has a great network, I really admire them, I think you're going to need to make some kind of an ask. If it's a close contact, if it's a family friend, if it's somebody you've previously worked for, then in those cases you can just make a non-ask connection. You know, it would be great to catch up. That's absolutely fine. But if it is somebody with whom the connection is tenuous, you're going to have to make some kind of an ask, because people are busy. Like you said, people are worried about whether they're going to have time to connect. Well, if you're the CEO, you've got even less time. So the ask is going to have to be specific so that they know how they can help you. Example, I've got a client currently who's been in a very senior role, and now is looking to move into headhunting. So she wants to become a headhunter. And what she did was she connected with various people, connected with headhunters that she had used before. And one of the people, she also was connected with the CEO of a big headhunter through another connection. She was very clear, I've done this senior role. These are my strengths. I've been having some conversations. I'm really interested in moving into headhunting. I'd be really interested in having a conversation with you. That person was too busy. That CEO of this huge global headhunter was too busy. But what she did was she flicked on the email to say, okay, these are the people in my organization you need to have a conversation with. I'm copying them all in. You need to have a conversation with this person who's the head of this headhunting department, this person who's the head of this headhunting department, and our head recruiter. Here you go. Please have a conversation with her. So if she hadn't made the ask and just said, hi, I'm me, that wouldn't have happened. So I think if you want something in return, you do have to get a little bit brave and make the ask. But I think the way that you frame the ask can be gentle and exploratory. It doesn't need to be desperate.
Awesome. Well, this was a very nice example and a great advice. And you also showed us the book a while ago. Would you like to tell the audience a bit more about the book? Who is it for, and what can they find inside?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not sure how relevant it will be to your audience, but it came out in 2016 with Penguin. It's called Step Up: Confidence, Success in Your Stellar Career in 10 Minutes a Day. And it was specifically aimed at women. I was doing a lot of work. I've always done a lot of work across all kinds of leadership, but I was doing quite a lot of work in female leadership for organizations at the time. And I just wanted a book that kind of reflected what I was saying, which is essentially, here are all the career behaviors that everybody should be doing